China's factory activity dropped a little lower in May, but the manufacturers remain confident as the economy recovers. Chinese PMI fell a few points from April, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, which means it declined. Still, the data shows the cost of raw materials is down. Logistics costs have dropped over the past 6 months. Meanwhile, non-manufacturing PMI grew in May for the 5th straight month of expansion. And for a closer look at the Chinese economy, we welcome back Dan McClory. He's the Managing Director and Head of China of Boustead Securities. Welcome back, Dan. Good to see you.
Hey, great to see you, Phil.
This thing with China, and I've said this before, is that we're in this kind of weird zone with China. On one hand, we are doing a ton of trade together, but there's some tense words between the two, and you see the headlines here and there. But at the same time, we, of course, need each other because we're doing all this trading. Are we better off today, you think, than we were 6 months ago?
I don't think so. I'm just talking geopolitically. I think the rhetoric has not improved. I think the possibility of economic cooperation is absolutely there. The will is there. You're hearing from major corporations about the importance of China in all of their game plans. But I don't think the relationship has improved between the countries, despite the codependencies that you're referencing.
What do we need to do then? Tell us how to fix it.
Well, you know, I don't want to invoke a song from the Beatles, but we need to come together right now. There's plenty of ways to come together. And I think a starting point would be economically. Let's get the economies back on track. You know, interestingly enough, China did not have a government-led stimulus to power itself out of COVID. I think these numbers that we're seeing in the month of May reflect that. Some of that consumer spending bump that came post-COVID has now backed off because it was really due to personal savings as opposed to government stimulus. So that could somewhat be expected. But I think finding ways of commonality, finding ways where we do actually cooperate, where there is such a large dependency between the countries and our companies, that's the way forward.
The stimulus you're talking about post-COVID, you know, in the United States, we were all very critical of all the money that was doled out, right? And I think it's fair to say a lot of that money didn't really go to the people who probably needed it most. In China, they didn't necessarily dole out any money, but they never provided any stimulus. But at the same time, you did get a little bump. Yes, you're right. Obviously, it comes from personal savings, but we're also seeing more activity in terms of international business, right? There are flights again, there are conventions again, there are summits again. And if you want things to get back to normal, it's not going to happen overnight. It takes a little time. I mean, what I'm asking for is maybe a little patience might be in order here.
Sure. Not just a little patience, but a willingness for people to re-engage, a willingness for people to hop on those planes that you point out have reopened their flights and to sit down and to understand there's a lot more things that bring us together than perhaps pull us apart. But that's going to take time. It's going to take effort. But I think the economic ties that bind us in non-controversial, you know, non-state influenced areas are very, very strong.
Elon Musk was there. I don't know if he's still there or not. We saw Jamie Dimon was there as well. So you see a number of these U.S. CEOs back on the ground over there. Does that give you perhaps some positive momentum that maybe some of these dialogues can begin, at least from the business perspective?
I think so. I mean, you could say Dimon's visit was offensive, Musk was defensive. You know, Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers are just hitting it out of the park. They are starting to export with a vengeance. They've got a massive market there. So I think Musk, rightfully so, has to go visit his manufacturing operations and ensure the continued relevance of Tesla. Dimon wanted to make a statement. We're back. The world's reopened. China, in fact, Hong Kong, where he spent his time, has reopened, and we're here to do business. So I think there were a couple of different reasons for their showing their face and for their presence, but I think to each of them, it underscores the importance of that market.
I mean, aside from geopolitical issues, China has its own challenges, right? They're trying to get their real estate industry back up and running again. They're trying to get employment to the youth, who it's been well documented that you need to have jobs for everybody to keep the economy chugging along. So they have some internal stuff that they're working through right now. Is there something policy-wise that would be able to help them move that ball a little bit further along faster?
Well, you mentioned real estate, and I mean, of course, a big part of the PMI decline in the month of May had to do with raw materials, things that are used to build stuff like homes, like office buildings, like shopping malls. So I think there's an expectation for some form of government support, whether it's a reduction of interest rates, which has been called for by many in China, the reserve requirement ratio, having that come down, which allows banks to essentially be able to lend more money. I think those are positive signs. And a reopening of the real estate sector with some growth would be just what the doctor ordered for China.
Well, let's give it a couple months, or maybe even sooner, and we're going to have you back, Dan, to see what progress that China is making or not making. Dan McClory, appreciate you as
Thanks,
always, and good to see you, head of China for Boustead Securities. Now.